She strolled along the perimeter walkway carrying administrative paperwork and a coffee cup, her civilian contractor badge and casual pace suggesting she was just another support staff member taking a break from routine office duties at Camp Lejeune's administrative complex. The afternoon qualification session brought standard marksmanship training as Marines completed mandatory weapons proficiency and tactical shooting exercises that maintained combat readiness for deployment rotations throughout multiple operational theaters. But as she passed the active firing line without breaking stride or showing any interest in the ongoing training, Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson suddenly called out from the range tower with confusion and growing amazement. Target 7, dead center bullseye, 10 ring, perfect shot. Every Marine on the firing line turned to stare at their targets, then at each other, then at the woman who continued walking as if nothing had happened, though she had never approached the firing line, never picked up a weapon, never even acknowledged the range activities that somehow registered a perfect shot exactly as she passed target 7. Dr. Sarah Chun adjusted her contractor identification while processing the impossible ballistic phenomenon that connected her current administrative consultant status with experimental marksmanship research that had been officially classified and terminated following breakthrough discoveries that exceeded current scientific understanding. The mysterious shot represented more than equipment malfunction. It indicated psychokinetic targeting capabilities that suggested her participation in classified programs that had developed advanced human potential applications exceeding conventional military training capabilities. She wasn't supposed to demonstrate remote targeting abilities, wasn't authorized for psychokinetic weapons applications, wasn't prepared for the reality that her carefully suppressed paranormal capabilities were manifesting despite years of conditioning designed to contain abilities that officially didn't exist in military research databases. From which military installation around the world are you following this paranormal phenomena story today? If you appreciate narratives that explore psychic warfare and the buried psychokinetic research within classified military programs, consider subscribing for more content that reveals the extraordinary human potential that transcends conventional military capabilities. Camp Lejeune occupied 156,000 acres of strategically positioned territory in North Carolina, its training facilities and classified research infrastructure representing the most comprehensive military development center, supporting conventional combat preparation and experimental human potential research that pushed the boundaries of current scientific understanding and military applications. The installation served as the primary coordination center for advanced human performance research, combining traditional military training, psychological conditioning programs, and classified psychokinetic development that enhanced combat effectiveness, while maintaining operational security for experimental programs that exceeded congressional oversight and scientific peer review. Located at the intersection of multiple research commands and experimental facilities, the base had been constructed with comprehensive testing laboratories and specialized research infrastructure designed to maintain experimental human potential programs even under strict classification requirements and scientific skepticism that restricted public knowledge of breakthrough discoveries in psychokinetic applications and paranormal warfare capabilities. Advanced research systems processed human performance data from hundreds of experimental sources simultaneously, creating comprehensive psychokinetic development models that guided military effectiveness enhancement while protecting operational security for classified participants and experimental programs. The base research architecture incorporated decades of advancement in human potential science and classified psychokinetic research, including underground testing laboratories, advanced monitoring systems, and automated measurement protocols that could maintain detailed performance analysis while protecting sensitive information regarding participant identities and experimental program results. Research personnel possessed multiple classification levels that preserved operational security while enabling appropriate development decisions based on experimental requirements and classified psychokinetic protocols. Dr. Sarah Chun approached the administrative walkway area carrying routine consulting materials and standard contractor documentation, her psychokinetic research background having been classified and suppressed following her departure from experimental programs. Though her current consulting assignment seemed inconsistent with the extensive paranormal research expertise that informed her human potential assessment capabilities and psychokinetic development knowledge. The departure process from military research had required comprehensive memory conditioning that suppressed references to experimental participation while creating civilian employment record that concealed her involvement in classified psychokinetic research and advanced human potential development programs. At 34 years old, she possessed specialized training from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency's Paranormal Warfare Research Division, having completed classified instruction in psychokinetic development, remote targeting applications, and experimental consciousness manipulation before her departure from military research following a program termination that had eliminated experimental research teams and classified discoveries that exceeded current scientific paradigms and military authorization. Her consulting employment record listed standard administrative analysis and routine project coordination, though these cover designations concealed advanced psychokinetic expertise and experimental research experience that had been suppressed following her separation from military research programs. Her research background included instruction at experimental facilities whose existence was denied by scientific oversight committees, where defense contractors and consciousness researchers developed methodologies that pushed the boundaries of current human potential understanding and psychokinetic applications. The programs she had completed involved theoretical consciousness manipulation, advanced psychokinetic development, and experimental remote targeting that prepared personnel for paranormal warfare scenarios that conventional military training could not replicate safely or effectively within standard scientific parameters. The decision to accept civilian consulting rather than continued experimental research had been influenced by ethical concerns and personal decisions that enabled her to maintain distance from psychokinetic warfare programs while managing abilities that had been enhanced through classified conditioning procedures. Her presence at military installations as civilian consultant provided routine administrative support, while her psychokinetic capabilities remained suppressed and officially unacknowledged by current military research programs. Colonel David Mitchell supervised the base training coordination with authority gained through 28 years of military service and extensive experience in conventional weapons training and classified human potential research. His expertise encompassing complex marksmanship coordination and experimental consciousness applications that supported training effectiveness and classified research across multiple experimental programs and psychokinetic applications. His background included research assignments throughout Army Research Command and liaison duties with experimental consciousness organizations that developed advanced human potential capabilities and psychokinetic coordination systems. His Distinguished Service Medal and multiple research development ribbons reflected exceptional performance in both conventional training coordination and experimental research that advanced military effectiveness and consciousness applications. The colonel's military career had evolved from conventional weapons training to experimental research coordination, including classified assignments with consciousness research organizations and psychokinetic development agencies that created comprehensive experimental systems and paranormal warfare protocols. His transition from traditional training to experimental research had been driven by recognition that future military requirements demanded enhanced human capabilities and psychokinetic applications that exceeded traditional military boundaries and required interdisciplinary expertise in consciousness research and paranormal development. Around the classified research coordination table sat representatives from Army Research Laboratory, experimental consciousness contractors, psychokinetic research organizations, and various classified development agencies, each contributing specialized expertise to human potential research and experimental consciousness development procedures that advanced military capabilities while maintaining scientific oversight for classified psychokinetic research and advanced consciousness applications. The assembled group represented decades of collective experience in experimental research, human potential development, and psychokinetic applications that maintain research effectiveness through comprehensive consciousness coordination and experimental optimization. Major Jennifer Walsh, the experimental research coordinator responsible for consciousness development and advanced human potential oversight, possessed 18 years of experience in experimental consciousness programs and held specialized research credentials that provided comprehensive oversight of classified psychokinetic research and consciousness development programs. Her background included specialized training in experimental psychology, consciousness analysis, and psychokinetic coordination procedures that enabled development of advanced human capabilities while maintaining appropriate research ethics and experimental effectiveness protocols. Major Walsh's expertise bridged the gap between theoretical consciousness research and practical military applications, translating advanced psychokinetic theory into functional development systems that enhanced military effectiveness, while maintaining preparation for consciousness applications that exceeded current scientific understanding. Her role required constant evaluation of experimental effectiveness, consciousness assessments, and psychokinetic coordination to ensure adequate human potential development for evolving military requirements and emerging consciousness applications. The experimental research team under Walsh's coordination represented carefully selected specialists recruited from leading consciousness institutions and psychokinetic research organizations, each bringing unique expertise to the complex challenge of developing advanced human potential while maintaining scientific standards that preserved research integrity and experimental reliability. Their work remained highly classified, but their research decisions directly influenced military effectiveness and consciousness coordination that protected national security capabilities and experimental programs. Captain Robert Patterson, the consciousness applications officer responsible for psychokinetic assessment and experimental coordination, possessed extensive experience in consciousness research and psychokinetic development that enabled coordination of comprehensive experimental programs through sophisticated research networks and consciousness development procedures. His understanding of psychokinetic capabilities encompassed both conventional consciousness applications and experimental approaches that pushed the boundaries of current scientific understanding and provided capabilities that exceeded standard human potential programs. The consciousness applications commander's background included specialized training in psychokinetic development, experimental coordination, and advanced consciousness methodologies that enabled identification of human potential and psychokinetic capabilities that conventional research systems might overlook or fail to develop within scientific parameters. His responsibility for consciousness applications required constant research advancement and strategic thinking that anticipated military requirements, while maintaining experimental effectiveness for emerging consciousness challenges and psychokinetic coordination. Colonel, recent experimental assessments indicate possible security gaps in our former participant monitoring protocols that might affect operational security and consciousness coordination for personnel with classified psychokinetic backgrounds, Major Walsh reported, her voice carrying research precision that characterized professional experimental evaluation. Research sources suggest former participants retaining unauthorized psychokinetic capabilities and consciousness applications that exceed current security parameters, though specific experimental details remain classified above our coordination level. Her assessment reflected constant evolution of consciousness security that characterized contemporary military research, where former participants often retained psychokinetic abilities that might compromise operational security, while experimental programs required consciousness oversight that challenged existing security protocols and research coordination procedures. The evaluation indicated security gaps that required enhanced monitoring measures and updated protocols to maintain experimental effectiveness and consciousness security. The current experimental assessment represented months of consciousness analysis that had identified patterns suggesting inadequate monitoring of former experimental participants and psychokinetic activities that exceeded standard security assumptions. Consciousness research intelligence sources had reported monitoring gaps and psychokinetic limitations that indicated preparation for consciousness applications that required enhanced security coordination and specialized experimental oversight. Major, what specific capabilities do our current monitoring systems provide for identifying former participants with unauthorized psychokinetic capabilities and ensuring appropriate security coordination and experimental oversight? Colonel Mitchell inquired, his question reflecting command responsibility for understanding consciousness limitations and ensuring adequate coordination for military research and psychokinetic security. The question addressed core challenges facing experimental planners in contemporary military consciousness research, where psychokinetic development created security challenges that might compromise operational effectiveness, while experimental programs required appropriate oversight and consciousness coordination. The assessment of current capabilities versus consciousness requirements was critical for determining security adequacy and experimental planning requirements. Sir, we've enhanced our consciousness coordination systems and implemented advanced monitoring protocols designed to identify former participants with unauthorized psychokinetic capabilities and consciousness applications that might not appear in standard security databases, Captain Patterson explained. His report reflecting systematic approach to consciousness coordination optimization that balanced monitoring capabilities with operational limitations of current experimental systems and consciousness coordination programs. However, some classification restrictions could prevent identification and proper oversight of psychokinetic manifestations, requiring security review and strategic planning that might take months to implement effectively. His analysis highlighted fundamental challenges facing modern consciousness coordination, where classification requirements created barriers to appropriate security oversight, while experimental research demanded coordination that challenged existing consciousness structures. The balance between current security protocols and experimental optimization required continuous review and strategic planning that anticipated coordination developments before they materialized into actual consciousness vulnerabilities or security failures. Chun quietly moved through the administrative walkway areas while maintaining her civilian consultant cover, her movements deliberately casual and non-military to avoid triggering attention that might activate her suppressed psychokinetic capabilities or reveal her experimental research background to personnel who lacked appropriate security clearances for her actual research history and consciousness development experience. Her experimental training enabled recognition of consciousness discussions and research assessments that civilian consultants might interpret incorrectly or fail to understand entirely. Her experience in classified consciousness research provided unique perspective on psychokinetic requirements and experimental coordination that informed her understanding of military research operations and consciousness planning. Though her classified experimental history remained suppressed and unknown to research personnel, who viewed her as routine civilian consultant requiring standard administrative support and project coordination. The consulting activities that Chun conducted served multiple purposes, beyond routine administrative support, allowing her to observe consciousness research operations while managing psychokinetic abilities that had been enhanced through experimental conditioning but required careful control to prevent unauthorized manifestations. Her specialized knowledge enabled recognition of consciousness research vulnerabilities that conventional consulting procedures might overlook, though she carefully avoided any demonstration of psychokinetic capabilities that could compromise her civilian cover. The walkway facilities represented months of construction and planning designed to provide optimal personnel circulation and administrative coordination while supporting daily operations that maintained research effectiveness and facility security. Standard walkway infrastructure, comprehensive security monitoring, and routine administrative coordination created operational advantages that sustained research activities even under challenging classification conditions and security pressures. The administrative specifications that guided walkway operations incorporated lessons learned from previous research installations and theoretical advances in facility security developed by research specialists and administrative coordination experts. Each facility component had been carefully designed to provide administrative support and personnel coordination that eliminated security gaps while maintaining efficiency for research operations and classified coordination requirements. Dr. Chun, continue consulting activities while research personnel complete training coordination and experimental assessment requirements, Captain Patterson observed, his guidance reflecting standard consulting protocols while acknowledging civilian contractor status that Chun maintained through her employment documentation and administrative authorization. His instructions contained routine consulting recognition and administrative coordination requirements that preserved operational security regarding consciousness research operations while maintaining appropriate consulting support for experimental programs and research coordination activities that required administrative assessment and project consultation. Chun positioned herself near the range observation areas while maintaining consulting duties that provided cover for monitoring consciousness research operations and experimental coordination that might indicate research gaps or security limitations. Her suppressed psychokinetic background enabled recognition of consciousness capabilities and experimental parameters that civilian consultants might interpret incorrectly or fail to evaluate properly. The consulting activities that Chun conducted automatically incorporated advanced consciousness analysis techniques learned during experimental research that emphasized psychokinetic innovation and coordination thinking beyond conventional consulting support. Her ability to evaluate consciousness research operations enabled identification of potential coordination improvements and psychokinetic vulnerabilities that purely consulting thinking might miss entirely, though she carefully avoided demonstrating any capabilities that could reveal her experimental background. The psychokinetic manifestation incident occurred approximately 20 minutes into administrative walkway transit. The distinctive remote targeting phenomenon and consciousness application triggering immediate recognition that connected her civilian consultant status with classified experimental research that had developed psychokinetic capabilities exceeding current operational authorization and security coordination requirements. The manifestation characteristics indicated legitimate consciousness application rather than equipment malfunction, suggesting experimental psychokinetic conditioning that demanded immediate attention and specialized consciousness security assessment. Her recognition of the psychokinetic targeting event reflected experimental participation and consciousness development that connected her to programs that officially operated under classification levels exceeding normal security coordination, research where her psychokinetic capabilities had been enhanced while maintaining suppressed status that protected experimental research and consciousness security. The remote targeting precision indicated experimental advancement that suggested either conditioning compromise or consciousness. Circumstances that justified revealing her psychokinetic background and experimental research expertise. The psychokinetic manifestation indicated genuine experimental conditioning rather than routine weapons training or standard marksmanship procedures, though the implications of revealing her consciousness capabilities created experimental complexity that demanded careful evaluation and appropriate security response procedures. The authenticity of the manifestation required consciousness verification, while operational security protocols demanded protection of classified research and psychokinetic development programs. Instead of immediately responding to the psychokinetic recognition, Chen carefully continued administrative activities while internally managing the consciousness abilities that had manifested despite conditioning designed to suppress psychokinetic capabilities. Her experimental research training included extensive instruction in consciousness control and psychokinetic suppression procedures designed to protect classified research while preventing unauthorized manifestations and consciousness applications. The management process required balancing immediate consciousness control with security protocols that protected classified experimental research and psychokinetic development from operational compromise or intelligence gathering. Her specialized background provided knowledge necessary for proper consciousness assessment while maintaining operational security that protected ongoing research programs and experimental coordination capabilities. The psychokinetic characteristics embedded within the remote targeting manifestation matched classified experimental protocols that Chen recognized from her consciousness research, indicating legitimate psychokinetic conditioning using advanced consciousness training rather than conventional weapons systems or equipment responses. The proper execution of remote targeting suggested experimental advancement that exceeded current security coordination and indicated consciousness capabilities that demanded immediate operational security assessment and psychokinetic recognition. Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson, the range safety supervisor responsible for monitoring weapons training and coordinating marksmanship oversight, noticed unusual ballistic patterns through routine observation designed to identify training anomalies and coordinate appropriate assessment procedures. Captain Patterson, we have unexplained ballistic events that indicate advanced targeting capabilities and require immediate security assessment and appropriate experimental coordination protocols. His observation reflected training monitoring capabilities that tracked ballistic activities and identified potential security requirements through careful observation of weapons training and marksmanship coordination activities. The monitoring systems represented consciousness security protocols designed to provide immediate identification of psychokinetic manifestations and coordinate appropriate responses that maintained operational security while preserving training effectiveness and experimental coordination. The psychokinetic intelligence gathered through Thompson's observation provided critical information about consciousness capabilities and experimental security that informed research planning and coordination procedures. The consciousness analysis of training activities enabled assessment of operational security requirements while maintaining experimental protocols that protected consciousness research and classified conditioning through appropriate security recognition and experimental procedures. Staff Sergeant Thompson, document the ballistic anomaly for experimental assessment while maintaining training coordination and standard range safety protocols. Captain Patterson replied, his response reflecting security procedures for consciousness manifestations that required experimental evaluation while maintaining operational security and training effectiveness. The captain's response demonstrated systematic approach to consciousness security that characterized effective experimental leadership, where psychokinetic manifestations required immediate security assessment and appropriate coordination while maintaining experimental oversight that informed research planning for consciousness coordination requirements. The priority placed on consciousness security reflected understanding that experimental capabilities required comprehensive operational security and appropriate psychokinetic recognition. Chun approached the range coordination area with measured movements that maintained her civilian consultant cover while internally managing the consciousness capabilities that her psychokinetic manifestation had revealed among research personnel. Her experimental research training enabled accurate understanding of consciousness security requirements and psychokinetic coordination that civilian consultants might misinterpret or fail to understand entirely. Her approach toward the range coordination area appeared routine to observers, but represented profound internal management of consciousness abilities that had manifested despite years of conditioning designed to suppress psychokinetic capabilities. The experimental knowledge that informed her understanding provided context for appropriate consciousness responses and security coordination that protected research programs through careful management. Captain Patterson, I cannot provide specific details about any experimental background due to operational security requirements and classified program protection protocols. Chin replied carefully, her voice maintaining civilian consultant demeanor while conveying information that reflected consciousness constraints and security protocols that exceeded standard consulting parameters. Any unusual phenomena should be evaluated through appropriate experimental channels while maintaining security for research programs and consciousness development activities. Her response provided context for consciousness security while maintaining appropriate operational security regarding classified experimental research programs and psychokinetic development that other personnel were not authorized to access. The distinction between civilian consultant status and experimental research participation was critical for determining operational security procedures while protecting classified programs and consciousness coordination. Major Walsh studied Chun with renewed interest, her experimental background enabling recognition that the response suggested consciousness research knowledge that exceeded civilian consultant status and indicated possible experimental background and psychokinetic experience that warranted careful operational consideration and experimental coordination. Dr. Chun, while we respect operational security requirements, unusual ballistic phenomena suggest possible experimental background that could indicate research participation. Can you confirm any experimental experience to ensure appropriate security protocols and consciousness coordination? Her question reflected institutional awareness of Chin's potential experimental expertise while acknowledging operational security constraints that prevented detailed disclosure of classified consciousness research programs and psychokinetic development activities. The precision of potential consciousness capabilities indicated research backgrounds that exceeded routine consulting experience and suggested experimental responsibilities that warranted careful operational consideration and appropriate consciousness recognition. Ma'am, I can confirm previous participation in experimental research programs that involved consciousness applications and advanced human potential studies. Chun explained carefully, her response demonstrating consciousness knowledge while maintaining operational security regarding classified experimental research programs and psychokinetic development that informed her consciousness assessment methodology. The research involved advanced consciousness applications and experimental coordination that exceeds civilian experience, though specific program details remain classified to protect operational security and research program integrity. Her explanation provided consciousness context that supported potential experimental recognition while maintaining appropriate operational security regarding classified research programs and experimental development that enhanced her consciousness capabilities. The acknowledgement of experimental research explained potential psychokinetic abilities while preserving security regarding specific programs and consciousness development that informed her experimental assessment and psychokinetic coordination capabilities. The exceptional nature of Chen's consciousness assessment impressed assembled research personnel who recognized that her experimental capabilities could enhance research effectiveness and suggested potential for specialized responsibilities within consciousness coordination and experimental authority that strengthen research operations. Her demonstrated consciousness expertise represented valuable experimental assets that could enhance research effectiveness and psychokinetic coordination evaluation. Dr. Chun, your experimental background suggests specialized research that could benefit our consciousness development programs and experimental coordination, Colonel Mitchell observed, his comment reflecting recognition that Chen's capabilities could contribute to research effectiveness, while acknowledging operational security constraints that limited detailed discussion of her experimental background. While respecting classification requirements, how might your consciousness expertise be utilized to enhance our experimental programs and psychokinetic coordination while maintaining appropriate security protocols? The question addressed institutional interest in Chen's experimental expertise while acknowledging that her demonstrated capabilities suggested consciousness knowledge that could enhance research effectiveness and experimental coordination. The approach reflected understanding that consciousness expertise should be utilized appropriately while maintaining operational security that protected classified research and experimental development programs. Sir, my consciousness expertise could contribute to experimental assessment and psychokinetic evaluation within appropriate security parameters, Chen replied carefully, providing information that maintained operational focus while acknowledging consciousness capabilities and experimental coordination that could enhance research effectiveness without compromising classified research programs. Her response provided context for her consciousness expertise while maintaining appropriate operational security regarding classified experimental research programs and psychokinetic capabilities that informed her consciousness methodology and experimental coordination procedures. The acknowledgement of consciousness contributions explained her experimental effectiveness while preserving security regarding specific classified research and experimental development programs that enhanced consciousness capabilities. The revelation of Chen's consciousness expertise provided explanation for her exceptional experimental capabilities while emphasizing potential institutional benefits from appropriate consciousness utilization and experimental coordination that honored classified research while enhancing operational effectiveness. Her presence as civilian consultant suggested consciousness coordination opportunities that could benefit experimental programs while maintaining security for classified research programs. Colonel Mitchell made immediate operational decision that reflected institutional recognition of exceptional consciousness expertise and potential benefits from coordinating appropriate experimental utilization requiring her specific consciousness knowledge and psychokinetic capabilities. Dr. Chun, we would welcome discussion of potential research collaboration opportunities that utilize your consciousness expertise while maintaining appropriate security protocols. Major Walsh, coordinate follow-up discussions regarding potential experimental consultation that could benefit our consciousness programs while protecting classified research backgrounds and experimental development programs. The research opportunity represented acknowledgement that Chen's consciousness expertise could benefit experimental programs while ensuring operational security that protected classified research and psychokinetic development. Her demonstrated consciousness capabilities suggested valuable research potential that could enhance experimental operations while maintaining appropriate protection for classified consciousness programs. The immediate nature of the research offer reflected institutional recognition of exceptional consciousness expertise when experimental situations could benefit from specialized psychokinetic knowledge and consciousness capabilities that enhanced research effectiveness. Colonel Mitchell's approach demonstrated operational flexibility that enabled appropriate expertise utilization while maintaining security coordination and experimental development. Protection. Major Walsh coordinated comprehensive research discussion that reflected genuine recognition of Chen's exceptional experimental background and consciousness expertise that could benefit research programs and experimental coordination. Dr. Chen, your consciousness expertise represents valuable experimental capability that could enhance our research effectiveness and psychokinetic coordination. We would welcome research collaboration opportunities that utilize consciousness knowledge while protecting classified research backgrounds and maintaining appropriate security protocols. Her research coordination represented beginning of potential consciousness relationships based on demonstrated experimental expertise rather than civilian assumptions about where exceptional consciousness capability might be located within research organizations. The acknowledgement of Chen's consciousness expertise offered opportunities for appropriate experimental research and psychokinetic coordination that honored specialized research while enhancing experimental effectiveness. The institutional interest implicit in Walsh's coordination reflected fundamental recognition of Chen's consciousness expertise and potential contributions to experimental programs while protecting classified research. Her transition from unrecognized civilian consultant to potential experimental researcher demonstrated how exceptional consciousness training could benefit research operations when institutional requirements recognized specialized experimental expertise and psychokinetic coordination capabilities. The consciousness research that Chen considered resulted from comprehensive experimental recognition and provided potential opportunities for consciousness expertise utilization that could improve research effectiveness and experimental coordination. Her consciousness expertise offered valuable research potential for experimental assessment while maintaining security for classified research programs and experimental development. Her background included consciousness research under classified conditions, supporting advanced psychokinetic programs, and developing experimental coordination expertise that could enhance research operations under specialized conditions. Each capability demonstrated value of classified consciousness research applied to experimental situations that protected research programs and enhanced effectiveness while maintaining operational security and experimental coordination. The consciousness expertise recognition that Chen experienced became reference point for civilian research utilization and experimental coordination, illustrating importance of maintaining institutional capability to recognize exceptional consciousness expertise and value of personnel with specialized experimental backgrounds and psychokinetic coordination capability. Chen's story demonstrated potential for civilian research relationships that enhanced experimental programs while protecting classified consciousness research and experimental development. 1 year after the psychokinetic manifestation incident, Dr. Chen accepted research position providing specialized consciousness assessment for experimental programs and psychokinetic coordination development. Her research reflected institutional recognition that exceptional consciousness expertise could benefit experimental operations through appropriate utilization that honored research while supporting experimental effectiveness and coordination development. Her progression from civilian consultant to experimental researcher demonstrated institutional capacity for recognizing and utilizing exceptional consciousness expertise when circumstances revealed psychokinetic knowledge and research requirements could benefit from specialized consciousness training and experimental coordination. The transformation reflected institutional learning about maintaining consciousness expertise recognition and research utilization regardless of classification constraints and security requirements. Today, Dr. Chen leads consciousness research services for multiple experimental installations, overseeing psychokinetic assessment and experimental coordination that supports research operations throughout the command structure. Her research team continues to advance consciousness coordination capabilities and experimental methodologies that protect research effectiveness while maintaining classified program protection. Her research position represents utilization of specialized consciousness training that transitioned from classified background to research expertise, supporting critical experimental operations and psychokinetic coordination programs. The trajectory demonstrated how exceptional consciousness research and experimental knowledge could benefit institutional capabilities for advanced research coordination and experimental effectiveness. The research organization she leads has become model for integrating civilian consciousness expertise with experimental requirements, attracting specialized research talent and consciousness coordination expertise. Her success has inspired similar research programs that seek to utilize consciousness expertise while protecting classified research and enhancing experimental effectiveness. The woman they had assumed was just walking past the range had become valuable consciousness coordination asset for advanced experimental programs, proving that extraordinary psychokinetic research often exists within individuals whose consciousness backgrounds remain protected by classification requirements. Sometimes the most exceptional consciousness capabilities come from individuals whose experimental knowledge has been preserved through civilian transition, and institutional effectiveness benefits from recognizing consciousness expertise regardless of its current presentation or classification history. Her story continues to inspire consciousness research specialists and experimental personnel who understand that exceptional consciousness training creates unique capabilities for enhancing research operations, demonstrating that psychokinetic expertise will find purpose when given appropriate opportunities to contribute to meaningful experimental missions and consciousness coordination operations that honor specialized research and experimental capability.